Katakuri versus Luffy is going to go down as one of those fights that we don't appreciate at the time, but once we go back and look at it, we're going to say, you know what? This was an amazing fight. This really gave us a lot of insight into the future as far as devil fruit usage, arm and haki. I mean, if you look at the anime choreography, everything around that fight was simply really good. But of course, it's underappreciated because the emotional weight was not behind it. The driving force of most One Piece fights typically comes from, again, the emotional weight. That's why a lot of people's favorite fight comes from is Rob Lucci versus Luffy, because of everything that was behind those blows, the fighting for Robin, and basically everything that was at stake. I mean, for Luffy versus Katakuri, we had a lot at stake as well, but it just didn't feel the same. It felt almost empty in compared to Rob Lucci versus Luffy. I think the reason for this is because there wasn't any plausible way for us to understand if Luffy actually lost, another way for Luffy to actually get out of there. Towards the end of the fight, it started to make sense because Katakuri started becoming fond of Luffy, and maybe with Katakuri winning and letting Luffy get away, that would have been better. But I mentioned Katakuri versus Luffy and One Piece fights in general to talk about Luffy versus Kaido, and actually round 2 of Luffy versus Kaido. When this fight initially happened, well, if you want to call it a fight, a lot of people jumped to conclusions. Of course, with the scaling and power scaling in One Piece, automatically placed Luffy on a level and Kaido on a separate level. Now, in no way am I saying Luffy and Kaido are on the same level, but I don't think the disparity is that great as to what we saw. Of course, Kaido is the strongest creature in the world, and Yonkos are extremely powerful, but what we saw is not an accurate representation of their true power levels. At least I think so. An underrated factor in One Piece is matchups and the importance of matchups and how you can expose and take advantage of these matchups. It's not really talked about enough, but it does matter. Again, with Luffy versus Katakuri, Luffy is the perfect person to fight against Katakuri due to his devil fruit and his insane durability and endurance. Katakuri versus most people, he's pretty much annihilating them because of his future sight and also the use of his devil fruit. One of the many advantages for Katakuri was size, but this became a disadvantage versus Luffy because Luffy was so small and Katakuri was so large. So in the midst of the fight, Katakuri trying to use his weapon to attack Luffy had such a small target point that Luffy was evading, and it was not far-fetched for him evading Katakuri. For instance, Katakuri versus Jack. Now, Jack is a durable monster, and I think Katakuri versus Jack would go, I think fairly easily, not fairly easily, mid-diff in Katakuri's favor, because a lot of people do look at Jack's endurance and say, well, how is Katakuri getting past that? Well, for Katakuri, he has a way to pierce people. I mean, he has his weapon. For Luffy, he was someone that could dodge these blows, so he evaded that fatal blow. I mean, even fighting Katakuri, Flampe mentioned that Luffy had been fighting through several life-threatening damages. So Katakuri versus Jack, I'm not sure how long Jack is evading Katakuri's weapon, but then it goes to, do you think Jack's arm and haki is stronger than Katakuri's arm and haki? One thing that we also forget is that Katakuri had insane arm and haki. His arm and haki was so strong that it made Luffy's arm and haki fist throb. Luffy was being hurt every time he bumped fists with Katakuri. Katakuri had said there were stages to armament and he had unlocked another level of armament. Let's fast forward, and now we know everything about Rayleigh's armament and it being a different, somewhat technique to what Katakuri was doing. But you know what? Let's save that for later. And let's get into Luffy versus Kaido, because that's the main focus of this video. I wanted to mention Katakuri versus Luffy or other fights in One Piece for some context. Luffy versus Kaido, from what we saw, was an annihilation, right? Luffy did his best attacks, some of his best attacks versus Kaido, and Kaido shrugged it off, brushed it off, had actually no damage. After this happened, a lot of people were wondering, how can Luffy overcome Kaido in such a short time? The thing is, overcoming Kaido in such a short time, it's not a short time when you think about it, because Luffy has several days, weeks to prepare for Kaido, the rematch with Kaido. And it's a lot of things, a lot of variables into this that's going to be completely different from what happened the first fight. Quickly, for some refreshing, the first fight versus Kaido, this was coming off Kaido destroying, or from Luffy's perspective, killing all of his friends, right? So Luffy abandoned the plan and went to directly confront Kaido. A lot of people didn't want to hear this explanation or argument, but the fact that Luffy was not in the right mindset and went really upset at Kaido, that really hurt him. Again, going back to Luffy versus Katakuri, one thing that was established by Katakuri was that he had to be focused and calm to use observation haki. When we skip forward and we see Luffy and Hyogoro in Udon, we see Luffy has unlocked a decent level of future sight. And so Luffy did not display any of that at all versus Kaido because, of course, he was not calm at all. So going back to matchups, Luffy and Kaido, they have the exact same strengths. Endurance, physical strength, and I would say unyielding will. Those are the two things that they have and they do very well. And that's why it was a bad matchup for Luffy. Because Kaido and blunt force attacks, I don't expect them to hurt him that much. Going against Kaido, I see Kaido has a scar. I would assume assume that that was done by a weapon and not an actual punch. The other variable going against Kaido was that Luffy was not calm, so future sight and observation haki was not a factor, so he got overrun. Another interesting thing in that fight was that Kaido somehow blitzed Luffy. And in no way do I think Kaido is faster, quicker, better closing speed. In no way than Luffy. Luffy just was not prepared for it. That's one thing with Luffy that we also cannot overlook, is that the first time he fights individuals, he gets bombarded. He really gets beaten up. Versus Crocodile, versus Doflamingo, versus Katakuri, versus Enel. Everyone he goes against, the first time he fights them, it's not a good result. Him and Gon from Hunter x Hunter has the same problem, where it was pointed out more clearly in Hunter x Hunter, where Kite said himself that Gon has painful starts to fights because it takes Gon a while to figure out his actual opponents. So that's why he does significantly better when he fights an opponent again. Go back to Hisoka versus Gon. First time in comparison to the second time in Heaven's Arena. But at Heaven's Arena, he had gotten a bit stronger, unlocking Nen. Several things he had fought other opponents, so he had gained more experience. And that's another thing here with Luffy. He has experience, but he's gaining even more with Hyogoro. Why do I think Luffy versus Kaido will be different the second time around? With all the advantages that Kaido has, I think Luffy is going to have some in his favor as well. The first and obvious thing is that Luffy will not be alone the next time he fights Kaido. I suppose the most popular thing people are saying is that it would be Luffy, Kid, and Law versus Kaido. And I think those three, based on their current power levels and where I expect them to be by the time they fight Kaido at Onigashima or wherever that may be, they should be enough to take down Kaido. I know it's difficult to see that based on what happened to Luffy, but just hear me out. First thing, Kaido will not be able to do that again to Luffy. Luffy will be in a better position and better prepared for Kaido and his Speed Blitz and whatever that was, his Thunder Bagua. That is another variable because we don't exactly what happened. We don't know if it was actual arm and haki. We don't know if there may be traces of Sea Stone on his actual weapon. So there are things that we have to figure out before the next fight. I'm sure we're going to know by the time the next fight comes around exactly what transpired. And it's going to be better explained because this was just meant to show or to portray a clear difference between Luffy and the other Yonko, regardless of what Big News thought. Regardless of what Luffy's bounty was, the other Yonko were on another level. So how do they close the gap? One, Luffy will not be alone. He will be with Kid and Law, and I think Law is a perfect support system because he can transport Luffy and Kid whenever they may see fit. And also, Luffy would have someone in Kid that has a masterful use of weapons. I think the difference between Kid and Luffy is that Luffy probably has better haki, but I think Kid has better use of his Devil Fruit because that's how he had to survive in the New World. So having Kid on your side, also having Law, that will be a better matchup for Kaido because with the three of them coming at Kaido, Luffy can provide support in different ways as far as like the other level of haki that I will discuss in a minute. Kid using weapons and Law providing support. Of course, Law has somewhat a trump card in Gamma Knife, and I don't think Mess would work here. Law did use Mess versus Doflamingo and that didn't work, so I don't think Oda would write it so that Law used an attack that didn't work versus Doflamingo and works versus Kaido, so that's ruled out. However, Law has several attacks that he can use to somewhat inflict damage to Kaido. One I see that's the main thing, of course, Gamma Knife. I don't see Law using the Immortality Surgery. Let's get that out of our minds right now. That will not be a thing here. It may be a thing in the future, but Law using an Immortality surgery on Luffy I think is almost ridiculous because if we go into the story and Luffy going to fight Blackbeard, going to fight Akainu, going to fight the world government, the Gorosei, M-sama is actually immortal, guys, like that's not something we want. That creates no level of tension. It would be completely obliteration of the One Piece story. And personally, I don't think Luffy would want that. That would take away some of the excitement of becoming Pirate King if you know that you can't die. The tough part about this is that people have an insane view of the Yonko, to the point that they feel like it would take 3 admirals to take down 1 Yonko. So thinking of 3 Supernova, 3 right-hand level characters, and a lot of people don't even place Law on that level. I'm placing Luffy and Kid on that level, and Law probably second commander, borderline right-hand commander by the time the end of the arc comes around. People can't see 3 right hands taking down 1 Yonko. For me, it depends on the right hand, the quality of the right hand. I mean, of course, Rayleigh is the epitome of that. But when you think about other right hands in the form of Ben Beckman, I think Katakuri gets a bad rap because of what happened versus Luffy, but Katakuri is freaking dangerous. For me, I look at those 3 as right-hand level characters, and I think Luffy, probably by the end of the arc, will be slightly above that. Him going against Kaido, having 3 of those characters and the ability for them to work together by seeing their fighting style before, they've fought together before versus the Pacifista on Sabaody, they will have a good knowledge of each others' powers, and I think they would mesh very well together based on how they fight, because Law, of course, again, runs support with his room. Luffy is a close range fighter. Kid is a long range fighter based on his powers, so they work very well together. It's a great combination. Secondly, Luffy will be in a much better mindset. He will be a lot more calm versus Kaido this time around, which he will make use of his future sight. I think everything we saw in Udon is just a microcosm of what's to come, using his future sight and probably directing others to help him with Luffy's future sight and whatever it brings. And we can argue from now until whenever, discussing whether it's future sight or not, future sensing, future hearing, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, at the end of the day, Luffy provides a distinct advantage, because I don't think Kaido has that level of future sight. I think Kaido is a physical monster. That's pretty much where it begins and ends with Kaido. So Luffy having that advantage will speak volumes to the outcome of this fight. However, that's not enough to take down someone as strong as Kaido, even though Law has that possible trump card in Gamma Knife. And again, the immortality surgery is ruled out here. The new level of Haki that Luffy will unlock, and one can assume Kid probably already has it, because Kid using weapons and probably having to apply armament Haki to weapons, that is the basic fundamental technique of what Luffy's trying to learn, is applying his armament Haki to another substance, or making it expend out of the body. Luffy in this level of Haki may do great things to Kaido, because of course Luffy said it may affect Kaido's scales and may be able to hurt Kaido's scales. I view it a bit differently. Of course, whatever Rayleigh did was able to somehow send this animal away, that elephant, whatever it was. He sent it away with just pure force. And we also saw with the admirals, when Whitebeard used his attack, they were able to send that attack away. It did not hit the platform where Ace was. I'm inclined to believe Luffy unlocks a special level of it, because Luffy, when he's using it now, he doesn't have his palm open. He's using it with his fist. So I'm looking at it in a different way, and that's why I think Leo Bazooka is going to be so important here. The reason why I'm saying this is that this technique, this attack, I believe is going to be in comparison to Rukogen. Of course, Rukogen is one of the Rokushiki techniques that you learn after you've mastered the other 6. So once you've mastered the other 6, Rukogen is unlocked, and then you can unlock a strike that is somewhat of a shockwave that goes through the body. So for Luffy throughout the story, everything he's done has not been a carbon copy of what he was trying to mimic. Even with Gear Second, Luffy doing Gear Second is not an exact carbon copy of Soto at all. Luffy just saw what they were doing and applied his own devil fruit to this technique and was able to do it. I know a lot of people don't like talking about this anime, but I do. I love it. Naruto. And Naruto, in which he had a way to create a Rasengan, or he had a specific way, but he was shown a different way. But with him improvising, he found out a different way to create a Rasengan, because he did not have the control of others to create it with one hand. So he used a Shadow Clone to create a Rasengan, of course, same result, and he even used and applied different techniques to create his Rasen Shuriken. Luffy is the same way. Even Gear 4th and the application of it, it's not a perfect application of combining Devil Fruit and Haki, but that's what he used to be improvisational. Luffy is the master of that. So in this instance, if Luffy can't master it the same way Hirogoro does it, or the admirals, or Rayleigh, Luffy will find a way to use this technique with his devil fruit, which I think will be even more devastating. And for Kaido, getting past his scales would probably be the best way to overcome Kaido, because then you're affecting his actual organs and whatever is beneath the scales, right? So I think for Luffy versus Kaido is going to be completely different, because the variables are going to be completely different. Luffy will be a lot stronger, and he's going to have allies with him. Of course, right now we're saying 2 allies, but there could be more, because a lot of the supernovas are going to be in Wano at the time, or they're already here. So leave your thoughts below. Tell me, do you think Luffy and Kaido, how do you expect it to go at the end? Do you think Luffy gets overrun the same way, even though he has help? Knowing Luffy's past of learning how to fight someone based on fighting them the first time, leave your thoughts below. I am really curious, and I would like to know some of the best comments. I'm planning on making a comment video later in the week, so let me know. Make sure to like the video. Be sure to subscribe. I will catch you guys in the next one. Shout out to all my patrons. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Peace.